The Ferrari is ready to inaugurate a new phase of the 2025 season with the update package that will arrive in the Imola race. In this video, we'll take an in-depth look at what's included in the update package. Let's get started. See Ralf Schumacher's statements about Hamilton because they have caused a lot of discussion and we need to comment on them together. And finally, let's also look at the updates from Red Bull and McLaren, with the words spoken on one side by Helmut Marko and on the other by Zach Brown. Before we start, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. With that said, let's get started right away. The Maranello team needs a breakthrough to get closer to the competitiveness of McLaren, Red Bull, and even Mercedes. That's why the month of May will be decisive for the team. In addition to the updates planned for Imola, the Barcelona round will also be crucial when the new Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile directives on the subject of flexible wings will come into effect. These rules could reduce the effectiveness of solutions currently very effective on cars like the McLaren, further compressing the leading group.
For Ferrari,
Imola represents an unmissable opportunity. Let's be clear, in Miami, no technical innovations will arrive due to the sprint format, which does not provide enough time to validate the changes on the track. The goal is therefore to make the most of the home race to test and confirm the evolutions. But what will be the main innovations coming? We will certainly see a modification to the bellies of the SF-25, which will be streamlined according to a project already planned in winter. This is an evolution consistent with the natural development path of the single-seater. In addition to the bodywork, an update to the bottom is also expected, the crucial element for the aerodynamics of ground effect cars. In fact, the first bottom introduced in Bahrain improved the load, but it was not enough. In Jeddah, the SF-25 still showed sensitivity and instability in various driving conditions. For this reason, the new specification aims to improve the distribution of the aerodynamic load, increasing stability and predictability of behavior in the curve. Charles Leclerc has pointed out that Ferrari still suffers from a deficit in terms of vertical load compared to McLaren and Red Bull, an aspect that penalizes the S25 on race pace and also in qualifying, especially in the phases of managing the single lap where the single-seater struggles to bring the tires into the right thermal window. Lewis Hamilton, for his part, has not yet been able to fully adapt to the unstable behavior of the car, a sign that the aerodynamic platform still has room for improvement. However, the SF-25 also has strengths, such as the management of tire degradation inherited from the car last year, which has not yet been properly valued. So these are the updates that will arrive at Imola, which are needed to increase the vertical thrust at the rear, thus increasing the mechanical grip on the rear tires, and the modification of the bellies will also be needed to better direct the flows towards the rear, reduce harmful vortices and turbulence. Also, enhance the single-seater's efficiency, which is already good. Be cautious, as there will be tests in Spain. In fact, it is not excluded that Ferrari may decide to postpone some updates directly to the Spanish Grand Prix. And there are two main reasons: gain time to refine the package and test it in a more stable technical context. Barcelona's complete track could satisfy the new Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile rules. However, this remains only a hypothesis for now. Such a choice could prove strategic, but we'd have to wait for one more race to confirm. And a tight world championship like this, where every point is crucial, is not good. Especially because Ferrari finds itself chasing, not leading the standings. The red team has a lot at stake in the month of May. The quality of the developments will determine the possibility of returning to the forefront and constantly fighting for podiums and victories. Alas, we will see if the direction taken will be the right one. And these Ferrari updates are needed to improve the single-seater to try to fight for victories, which is the fundamental goal even before the fight for the title. But not only will they also serve to make its drivers feel more at ease, both Leclerc and especially Hamilton. He is going through a crisis period, as he himself has stated. He is struggling to find his performance. And he sees, from the other side, a Leclerc who instead manages to bring a difficult car to drive to the podium. And on Hamilton's situation, Ralf Schumacher also took a stand, and we have to comment on his words together. Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari dream risks turning into a nightmare. After a season start well below expectations, the 7-time world champion seems to be struggling to find the feeling with the SF-25. And while the clerics continue to be the point of reference in Maranello, Hamilton is struggling to adapt, appearing increasingly demoralized. So much so that Ralf Schumacher, former driver and voice of Sky Germany, does not rule out a sensational hypothesis, namely early retirement. Ralf Schumacher stated he seems to not enjoy it anymore, and he intervened during the Backstage Pit Lane podcast of Sky Formula 1 Germany, where Schumacher expressed his concern without mincing words. Hamilton can't handle the Ferrari. He seems really down. If you find yourself getting slower and without resources, you lose everything. I know what it feels like. You reach a point where you ask yourself, why am I still doing this? And if that feeling doesn't change, quitting becomes a real option. According to Ralph, the gap to Leclerc is not just technical, but also mental. The Hamilton-Ferrari project was huge, but today it's far from reality. The gap from Charles is impressive, and I would never have expected it. Under these conditions, Lewis could decide to call it quits. And these are the statements from Schumacher that we will be commenting on shortly. But despite the 2-year agreement with the team, which on paper ties Hamilton to Maranello until the end of 2026, the former Mercedes driver could seriously reflect on his future. At 40 years old, with a legendary career behind him and a life full of interests off the track, Hamilton could decide to stop earlier than expected. Especially if the feeling of no longer being competitive continues to haunt him. However, Schumacher doesn't entirely rule out a comeback. In fact, he said in China during the sprint, Lewis has shown that he can still shine when conditions are favorable. If he finds a track and a setup that make him comfortable, he can still be fast. Not everything is lost. In short, Hamilton's future in Ferrari remains therefore in the balance. Imola and Barcelona could represent 2 decisive stages to understand if it is a passing crisis or the twilight of one of the most extraordinary careers in the history of Formula 1. And this is true, but in my opinion, Hamilton cannot think of retiring so soon. He signed a 2-year agreement with Ferrari. He will respect it because he is not the classic driver who ends an agreement early, both because there are many millions at stake and also because there are agreements with sponsors and because his desire to continue racing is there. We see it. Every weekend he commits himself to the maximum to go as fast as possible. Maranello also said it. He stays inside the box until late at night to try to improve the setup on the electrometry areas of the opponents. This is the attitude of a 7-time world champion who is putting in the effort. Only the results on the track are not coming. This is the real problem that will probably be improved with a better sensitivity to the car. When significant updates arrive that will increase the load at the rear, in my opinion, Hamilton will also get along better with the SF-25. So let's give time to the 7-time world champion to at least get close to Leclerc, because we don't say he has to necessarily beat him. Leclerc knows the car better than Hamilton, but he can at least get there.
Close then.
Once he has faced this year, and also next year with the new regulation, if he really won't be 100% competitive and we'll see him fight in the back, then at that point he can think about not renewing the current contract, but in my opinion it was wrong for Schumacher to say that there could be an early retirement. But I'm curious to know what you think about these statements. Let's also take a look at the special Ferrari livery dedicated to Miami. In fact, Ferrari is preparing to hit the track in Miami with a whole new look. For this race in the United States, the Maranello team will feature a special livery, made in collaboration with title sponsor HP, who has teased fans with a brief preview on social media. After the stages in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, the Miami Grand Prix, which this year will again host a sprint format, will see Ferrari present itself with an exclusive livery that will be officially unveiled on Wednesday, April 30th, a few days before the start of the race weekend. HP's brief social media video announcement was entrusted with the task, but did not reveal much. But it gave a glimpse of some clues about the colors that could characterize the SF-25. The anticipation grows among fans, curious to find out if this year Ferrari will also feature details in blue, as already happened in 2024, and it wouldn't be the first time that the Maranello team. The single-seater was painted in bright sky blue colors for a special Miami livery 12 months ago. On the halo on the front wing, in the engine hood area, in the hubcaps, and on the rear wing, thus celebrating the debut of the partnership with HP. Even the team's driver uniforms were adapted for the occasion with a color combination that mixed the classic Ferrari red with 2 shades of blue. There might also be a reference to the Pope's death, as it already happened in Bahrain in 2005 with the black detail on the Ferrari's nose. Now all that remains is to wait for the official presentation date to discover how the SF-25 will present itself in the sunny setting of Miami. An added flair in one of the calendar's most spectacular settings. And yes, it will be interesting to see what the Ferrari livery will look like in Miami, if they will keep the blue details as they did last year, and on the next track there will be the sprint race, which is something favorable to Ferrari. We know that when you have to prepare the setup from Maranello with the data from the Ferrari simulator, it always manages to be one step ahead of the others. The problem comes when you have to do the fine-tuning, that is when you have to improve the setup after the free trials. There, Ferrari struggles more, so in Miami we could also expect a stronger Ferrari than usual, as we also also saw with the sprint race in China, but let's also talk about Red Bull now because it will bring updates to
Imola indeed.
Red Bull can't afford mistakes. More than a world title is at stake. Max Verstappen's future, who is increasingly central to the project, is also on the line.
Demanding after
the departure of Adrian Newey, the Milton Keynes team has shown some cracks, but it remains one of the reference forces of the championship. And a new technical package is expected at Imola that aims to relaunch the RB21 in the challenge against McLaren. The departure of Adrian Newey has inevitably left a void in the technical structure of the team, which has lost one of its main points of reference. In the meantime, McLaren has taken the stage thanks to a solid and meticulously planned project dominating on various fronts, including flexible and aerodynamic solutions. Red Bull isn't giving up. Max Verstappen is still in the race for the driver's title, leading Piastri by 12 points. However, the constructors' gap is wide, with 99 points to recover. A difficult gap to close, especially in the absence of a second consistently competitive driver. And the problems encountered in the first appointments of the season mainly focus on degradation.
Of tires, particularly
evident on tracks that require soft setups like the
Bahrain.
The RB21 suffered from a lack of grip in
traction, forcing
Verstappen to shift up early to limit the rear skidding. The situation is different in more rigid circuits like Suzuka and Jeddah, where the car has shown to be more competitive. In Jeddah, the Dutchman secured a second place, which could have turned into a victory without the penalty. At the end of the race, Max confirmed it, the car was more balanced and the degradation much more manageable. The improvement is not a coincidence. After hours of work on the simulator, Red Bull engineers have introduced micro adjustments to the suspension setup of the RB21 changes that, although minimal, have helped to reduce tire wear. In F1, managing degradation is one of the most complex challenges, affected by suspension geometry, characteristic angles, aerodynamic load distributions, and the balance of the car. But the real leap in quality will come with the Imola Grand Prix in mid-May. It's there that Red Bull will introduce a completely revised aerodynamic package, deliberately avoiding to anticipate it in Miami, where the sprint format limits the possibility of tests and validations on the track. The challenge against McLaren and Ferrari will also be decided on the development front, and Red Bull, after an uncertain start, has every intention of getting their RB21 back on track, focusing on targeted updates and on Verstappen's effectiveness. The race for the title is still long and far from over. And also pay attention to the words of Helmut Marko about Isa Qajar. In just over a month, Isa Qajar has completely overturned the narrative around him. After the traumatic debut in Australia, where he ended up headtail in the formation lap under the
rain, the
Racing Bull's rookie has been able to react with determination and convincing performances.
To recognize him.
Now even Helmut Marko acknowledges him, who after harshly criticizing him now calls him the surprise of this early season. The spin in Melbourne with attached crying and awful vision had made Nasso a laughingstock to Helmut Marko, who had made heavy criticisms a tear-jerking and embarrassing spectacle. So he had defined him. But the French talent reacted greatly, scoring 5 points in the following races and solid performances that often saw him ahead of his teammate Liam Lawson.
And Helmut?
Marko has changed his tone about it. Isaac has always been fast, despite not knowing many of the circuits. Apart from the mistakes in Australia, he made few errors, he is consistent in the race, manages the tires well and keeps his cool. It's very rare for a rookie. A significant recognition for a driver who Marko had already labeled as a little Prost in the past. In his analysis, Helmut Marko also praised Yuki Tsunoda, recently promoted to Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen. Despite retiring in the first lap of Jeddah due to a collision with Gasly, the Austrian manager said he was satisfied with the performance of the Japanese driver. Yuki has the right pace and the approach is correct.
In qualifying,
he only paced 2-3 decibels from Max, which is a normal margin. Without the accident, according to our simulations, he could have finished 6th. A big step forward. Our second car was rarely so competitive, and after years of turnover and instability in the second seat of the Milton Keynes stable, Marko suggests that things might finally change with a growing Jara in the satellite team and a more and more mature Tsunoda in the parent team. The Red Bull drivers' puzzle might start to find its final shape. So this seems to be the theoretical stability that Red Bull has achieved, and we'll see if it will maintain it throughout the season and also next year. Tsunoda retired on the first lap, but the performance is there. As Helmut Marko said, he qualifies 2nd or 3rd in Daymax, which is good for the second Red Bull driver. Red Bull requires a stable second driver from him. The initial races without one have impacted their Constructors' Championship standing. But now we have to talk about the team that is leading the Constructors' standings, namely McLaren. In fact, McLaren continues to move well ahead in terms of development. During the free practice one of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah, the Woking team tested 2 new aerodynamic solutions on the rear of the MCL-39, entrusting them to Oscar Piastri. It was a targeted test, aimed at collecting data for the Miami Grand Prix, where the team plans to officially introduce the new package, just as it did in 2024. In the current regulations based on ground effect, the efficiency of the car's underbody is crucial, generating between 60 and 70% of the total downforce. To maintain high performance without sacrificing top speed, teams are looking for solutions that increase load without generating excessive aerodynamic drag. It is in this context that McLaren brought a redesigned diffuser to the track in Jeddah, in addition to new prototype fins mounted in the rear area. These components aim to optimize flows in key areas for the efficiency of the single-seater. Contrary to what some voices have claimed, the new features tested have not been rejected. The team, led by technical director Rob Marshall, simply chose to conduct an evaluative test in anticipation of Miami, where the sprint format will drastically limit the time available to test updates, with only one free practice session available. In this sense, the decision to use the F1S in Jeddah to collect comparative data, with Piastri on the new package and Norris on the standard version, was a well-calculated preemptive move. With 4 wins in 5 races and Oscar Piastri leading the World Drivers' Championship ahead of Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, McLaren is currently the technical benchmark of the grid. But he knows well that the competition, primarily Red Bull, is working to close the gap, especially in view of the European season that will start with Imola. Last year it was in Miami that McLaren introduced the upgrade package that marked the turning point of its season. History could repeat itself. The team wants to arrive in Florida with the single-seater already ready, avoiding having to face last-minute adaptations during a weekend compressed by the format.
Sprint, despite
the dominance in clean air, the MCL-39 shows some limitations in overtaking due to a top speed not always up to the rivals. The head of aerodynamics, Peter Prodromo, is working on this very issue.
aspect increase?
The efficiency without sacrificing the balance to make the car competitive in every situation.
The McLaren
thus prepares for the American challenge with the aim of maintaining the advantage gained, and the technical battle of 2025 is just beginning. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we have covered in the video. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any video that's here on the channel. I update you every day on all the Formula 1 news. I leave you other related videos. Here from Rasidu to see you in the next video.